This is the Pennsylvania Municipal League. We serve municipalities, cities, boroughs, and townships all over Pennsylvania. We do advocacy, member services, and cost savings programs, and a whole bunch of training for local officials year-round. This is our Municipal Leadership Summit. We bring together the members of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, those cities, boroughs, and townships throughout Pennsylvania. We're up to 144 municipal members. These are the mostly populated areas of the Commonwealth. People are familiar with Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, of course here in Scranton, the Lehigh Valley, Erie, Wilkes-Barre, York, Lancaster, Lebanon, Harrisburg, on it goes. And with a growing number of boroughs and townships, we have a terrific group of municipal leaders. We also have the career fire chiefs here with us again this year. We're very excited about that. And we certainly are very excited to have our longtime partner, the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Commissioners. So these are first-class townships just adjacent to urban areas, and they're actively involved here as well.
Scranton is so delighted to welcome the Pennsylvania Municipal League here. October in Scranton is always great. We have beautiful weather, a beautiful city ready to host everyone and really get into discussions about how we can make our cities better together. Take ideas from each other. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. If somebody's solved a problem, we want to be able to take that to our own cities. We're also excited to welcome the fire chiefs. I was able to just speak with them. So we're looking forward to a great few days and a great weekend.
This year's theme is building safe, resilient communities, and we're focusing all of our sessions on three tracks: public safety, municipal finance, and community development and infrastructure. Most issues that local leaders wrestle with have to do with one or more of those areas.
Probably our biggest threat is flooding. We've had several things that have happened like that, and we have taken some measures to try to reduce the risk of that. We're actually currently working on our plan for all hazard mitigation. And we have a lot of truck traffic and that sort of thing, which is potential for hazardous waste and stuff in the event of an accident.
And everyone wants to live in a safe, resilient community. So in Williamsport, again, we're focused on public safety. We want our schools to be safe. We want our neighborhoods to be safe. We're working diligently with our police department, other public safety officials for programs in the community, making sure our public safety folks are in the community, building those relationships, building those bridges. We have a critical intervention team that we're rolling out, actually, that's getting ready to roll out, hopefully by the end of this year, if not early next year, again, to just so that folks that are experiencing some of the mental, social, behavioral health issues, that they get the resources they need. So again, a lot of initiatives are really excited, but public safety is paramount in any community.
Ferguson Township, we actually haven't had a tax increase since 2008, and so we are currently, going through some observations and having lots of conversations with elected officials, understanding that the township hasn't had a structurally balanced budget in the last 5 to 6 years, and while the deficit has been often quite minimal, over the years you can only dip into reserves for so long until you have to acknowledge that we need to raise taxes. We had a stormwater utility fee that we adopted in 2022. It was actually enacted, my apologies, the stormwater utility fee was enacted in 2021 by my predecessor, Manager Probolka. And the implementation of that, was a little rough, got off. And while that revenue we only bring in about $1.2 million in revenue after you reduce the credits and exemptions. And so the amount of resources that it takes to administer that stormwater fee really is just not in the best interest of the township. So the township's actually in the process of repealing that ordinance, acknowledging that we are going to need to have a revenue diversification strategy, and that is something that we are investing a lot of resources on to make sure that incremental tax increases happen in a sustainable way and in a way that doesn't necessarily, come with a hard impact on our residents.
We're safer when we have better public safety. We're always investing in our public safety. We're safer when we have better infrastructure. So not just stormwater, but rebuilding roads, bridges, that type of infrastructure is really important to the safety and the future of our community. But we're also doing the future forward things, looking at housing, multi-family development, new restaurants, new amenities, making sure that we have all the types of entertainment, sports, arts, and culture that people want and deserve. It's a great place to live here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Scranton is the cultural hub of that, and we're excited to keep moving forward.
Resiliency can apply to a lot of different things. It could be natural disasters, like we're seeing in the southern part of our country right now, but it also can be, new challenges like we saw a couple years ago with the pandemic. It also is, planning for the future in terms of energy and growth. So, resiliency, I think, takes on many forms. I think it's why conferences like this are important, because you get together with your colleagues and talk about strategies that we're each deploying, and everybody has a little bit different approach. And I think at the end of the day, you put them together, and it's it's like a piece of stained glass. You get a good work that I think can be applied across the board.
I think that we've been a model coming out of the pandemic of how do you go from a space and a place where you might be struggling originally, but you see traction as it relates to building communities, seeing collaboration, and growing together. We have a number of public-private partnerships that were created that have put us in a position to provide amazing resources, great opportunities, and some significant change as it relates to how we do business. The pandemic taught us that people can work from anywhere, so we have to do our due diligence to become more attractive as it relates to people, as well as it relates to businesses.
Looking at building safe communities, we're definitely trying to make our downtowns more walkable, more friendly to the pedestrians, and for tourists as well. So trying to make sure that we're creating safe communities is a priority for us in Franklin.
Resiliency is important. We've been experiencing rain events in Altoona over the last 3 years that are increasing in frequency, and the amount of damage that they leave in their trace. So just things like that, finding out how we can be more resilient and sustainable is important.
We have a civility pledge that we've adopted within this past year, so local officials can use this in their public meetings. They can encourage the public to create an atmosphere of respect and professionalism when they're talking about local issues. We know today there can be a lot of vitriol. People have very passionate views on the extremes. We just want to make sure at the local level we're doing everything we can to have an important dialogue and a progressive dialogue that people are going to sit there and focus on the solutions to problems and challenges that we face, and do it in a respectful and a civil way. And we think the Civility Pledge is one way to do that. We have other resources on our website to help local communities and really any organization in promoting civility.
Today, more than ever, we must engage in civil discussions, disagree with respect, and with the goal of understanding our neighbors better. After all, we all want the same things, don't we? Safe neighborhoods, clean streets, places to congregate in the open without fear, and more opportunities for our children to get ahead. We must remind ourselves that we have much more in common than we have in terms of differences. And without a doubt, you've all seen and heard about the recent acts of political violence throughout our country, not just physical violence, but political violence in terms of verbal confrontations, disagreements, and some unpleasantries out there. You may think that it's part of our fabric, but it's not. Fortunately, there are fine organizations that are working throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania who are working to create coalitions that promote peace, promote understanding, and a fundamental respect for our fellow residents. How we speak to each other matters. How we interact with each other matters, which is why the League has been pleased to be part of a statewide effort through Search for Common Ground with faith-based leaders, business executives, nonprofit leaders, university representatives, and officials in the agricultural industry. This active coalition seeks to foster more understanding while also sharing necessary tools to diffuse tricky situations, along with a rapid response playbook that helps leaders prepare for and deal with threats to our democracy.
Political violence is any act, whether physical or verbal, that controls or changes who benefits from and or who participates fully in political, economic, and sociocultural life. The effect of these acts of political violence is often a chilling effect, meaning that people withdraw from things that they would normally do, both in public and in public service. And I think I don't have to really press that point home for that to resonate with you all, how we've seen that play out in people in roles in our community deciding to leave, deciding to step away from things that they've done for a long time because of the environment that they're facing. The other thing I want to point out about our definition is that oftentimes when people think of political violence, they think about just related to or having to do with politics. But really, the way we define that is anything that impacts people's full participation in public life. You don't have to be political to experience the impact of political violence. The second thing that I want to point out is that it isn't just physical acts that create this climate. It's threats, harassment, intimidation, whether of public officials or of people walking down the street who may believe differently or vote differently than you.
Post-COVID, people, for some reason, have gotten very disrespectful. And everybody should have an opinion, and everybody does, and they should talk about what their issues are, but they don't have to do it in a way that's disrespectful to the people in power.
I always say in our community, we want to make sure that we have a place where every single person is safe, loved, and celebrated. And so no matter where we come from, what our ideals may be, we have to be able to come to the table with dignity and respect and ensure every person has their voice and that it's heard, but it's heard in a respectful way.
Here in the city of Harrisburg, that seems to be a problem with civility. I don't know, because of all the different political things going on that, it has gotten to a point where people are not civil to each other.
There's a lot of divisiveness in politics, and it seems to be becoming more so every day. Fortunately, again, in the area, the small borough in which I operate, Evansburg Borough, we have not had issues with civility. We have very normal meetings without a lot of yelling and screaming and disruptions. So, but it is still something that's important, especially on a bigger scale when you start looking at state politics and national politics.
With social media and the 24-hour news cycle is that, there's a lot of people that look at government, that look at government policy, the way that people look at sports, as if it's something to root for or it's something to always be really, really, really fired up about, like you're rooting for the Eagles or cheering on the Sixers. And, there's a place for that, and you always want people to be passionate. But, our system is based on the idea of people coming together that might not see eye to eye on every issue and finding a way to find common ground. And it seems that finding common ground is more and more difficult, not just for elected officials, but for a lot of citizens.
As a community, a community is fundamentally common unity. And so we have to pay attention to the fact that there's more that unites us than divides us. And if we're just paying attention to, a handful of hot button issues that, you can get some quotes into, or, you can sling mud at other people, we lose the sense of what it is that brings people together and helps to uplift our entire community as a whole.
Civility is important because passion sometimes, I think, transfers into how people treat one another when they're unhappy about something. So whenever you make decisions in a municipal sense, someone's going to be happy, someone's going to be unhappy. So we always try to promote civility and kindness and being able to accept decisions that may not go your way or things that you may not agree with. We're always trying to do what we feel is best for the greater good, and we want to keep in mind that we're all neighbors. We're all trying to, ultimately we all want the same things, like safe communities, and we want our children to be safe in school, in the community, and things like that.
Well, I think if you see the temperature of the country right now, you're really going to tone it down a little bit just to get everybody talking again in a civil and friendly manner in a way. It's not get the hostility out of things.
The civility thing is always good. We've not had much of a problem with that in the past in Chambersburg, but some areas it is pretty hot conversations that go on, but not so much with us. We've been very fortunate with that. And before we start our meeting, or as we start our meetings, we always have a period of time, 2 to 3 minutes, where someone from the public can address council about anything that's not on our agenda, which is a very open and transparent kind of thing that we get a lot of feedback from our constituents.
For the first time in my life, I'm actually concerned that no matter what happens in this election, whatever the outcome, I do fear after the election there could be civil disorder. And I worry that it could happen in places like Harrisburg, in Lansing, in Madison, in Atlanta, in Phoenix, in North Carolina, and in Nevada, and at the time of the state certification issues. Because we have raised the stakes in this election. One side says, Trump says, if I lose, you're not going to have a country anymore. The Democrats say, if he wins, you're not going to have a democracy anymore. We're going to be an autocratic dictatorship. So now the stakes are way up here. And, you can see how some people might feel they have to fight over this. We don't support or condone any of this violence, but we've raised the stakes so high. People live too often in alternative realities. They're alternative realities, that there is not a common view of what the facts are anymore. I mean, I don't know about you, and you all are in municipal government, you get calls from people, and they'll start telling you things. They got information from some site or some source that you've never heard of. And you have no idea what they're talking about. And here you are reading your local newspaper, or you're reading more, I'll say, legacy media, traditional media, and that's kind of where I am. And I could have conversations with people who get this information off they get it off of TikTok or X or wherever they're getting it from, unvetted information. That's a lot of conspiracy theories, and you really can't have a conversation because it's hard to agree on what's truthful. And many of these people who are calling you, they're not dumb. They're just getting a lot of bad information. And it's hard to argue, even to have a conversation. And so when you have this type of environment in the country, it's difficult for people then to sit down and try to come to agreements on major pieces of policy. And that's kind of where we are. And it seems too that many people aren't even, I hate to say it, but we don't talk about policy that much anymore. I mean, you look at the presidential campaign, you hear, if you actually try to bore down a little bit and hear, what are both Trump and Harris saying, and I got to tell you, it kind of gets lost. I'd like to have a conversation about tax and trade policy. I think these are really big deals. My concern is that there'll be a significant number of our citizens, perhaps on both sides of the aisle, who might not accept an election outcome. That whatever this outcome is, people are going to be very unhappy. And what will happen is some will say the election was rigged, and then they'll go and they'll protest, and they'll go to their state capitals and try to contest the certification of the presidential vote, even if, which is likely the case, the election will be free and fair. But that's not going to stop them. And if they don't believe that the election is fair, and they think it is rigged, they might, engage in violent activities that would be very unsettling to this country and certainly to our various states.
What's your advice to local officials, particularly here in Pennsylvania?
Just be calm, be the voice of reason, be measured, and it's all they can really do. Put their messages out, and particularly at the county level, I think they should be transparent about how they talk about the conduct of their elections. And they can let people know that we have a fair and open system, and have people from both parties who work in those election systems have both sides come out and talk about their processes, why the process is fair, and why the outcome is legitimate. I think they have to go out there and forcefully state that. People from both parties and these election administration officials are probably the best ones to do it. But my fear is, too, that we've had pressure on election officials. Many good people who work on election day,
who work at the voting precincts or in the county election offices, I always found them to be very fair. But if these people decide to hang it up because it's too dangerous, it's not worth the headache any longer, and they get replaced by people who might have a predetermined outcome in mind of an election, well, then we've got a problem. And I don't know how to deal with that. I don't think we're there, thankfully, but I do worry about that if we make it so difficult for these people to conduct elections in the ordinary way that we've always done it, fairly and openly. But if we make it hard for these people and tell them that they're criminals and that they're crooked and they're biased, and they decide they have enough, and they get replaced by people who are, they get replaced by people, who think elections are all rigged, and they have an idea of who they want to be elected. Well, that's pretty dangerous.
Right now, I think it's probably our tax base. We've had a number of industrial sites that have filed claims for appeals for their minimum taxes, and so there's a good chance that we'll lose a considerable amount of money from our revenue, and so we need to find ways to make that up.
Well, I think one of the largest issues, and I think it's pretty consistent across the Commonwealth right now, is affordable housing. It's something we're talking about in almost every meeting we have, whether it's a local meeting, a county meeting, or a statewide meeting.
What would you like to see happen?
Well, I think, the governor took some great steps a couple weeks ago and has announced that Pennsylvania will be launching a plan. Fortunately, the Municipal League will be able to participate in the development of that plan, and I think we just need to develop a comprehensive strategy that we can work on, because the fix won't happen, in weeks and months. It's going to take, the year and subsequent years, and I think it'll be a problem that going forward, we'll consistently see. But I think there are great opportunities out there for us, not only in the cities, but even in our townships and boroughs, to develop some ideas that can help us in this realm.
We're not unlike anywhere else. Housing, public safety, infrastructure, parks and recreation, just making sure people can enjoy where they live, work, and play. And so we're doing a great job addressing some of that. We've put a ton of money into our parks and recreation. We're rolling out some public safety initiatives, as well as some infrastructure things as well, levy and other things along those lines. So, a lot of good things happening and a lot of work still to do.
It's always so much, right? In a city, there's so many different things that we want to focus on. Here in Scranton, we're making sure that our infrastructure is getting updated, so we're putting a lot of money into stormwater. As you see these storms coming in, we had a really bad one last September in Scranton. We're very focused on stormwater management and stormwater infrastructure. We're also dealing with youth violence, an uptick in that violence, and we're working across partnerships, across law enforcement and with the county, using rescue plan dollars to stand up a new organization that can help combat youth violence.
Our biggest issues is sustaining our tax base. We are a relatively built-out community. We're about 16,000 people, so we struggle on a daily basis and a yearly basis to, grow our tax base, because we're a relatively built-out community. We're mostly a residential community.
Finance, being fiscally responsible, and keeping taxes low, those are the things that people care about, and clean communities, making sure they're getting services and getting a return on their investment as far as taxes that they pay. No one likes to pay taxes, and whatever you pay is always too much. So you want to make sure that residents are happy getting a return on their investment with services and the quality of life in their area.
I think one of the issues that's, it's a problem that we have in Bethlehem, that you have in a lot of cities and a lot of places in Pennsylvania, is we just have this incredible demand to live, which is both a great story, because it means people want to be a part of our communities, they want to be part of our neighborhoods, they want to send their kids to our schools, but there's so much demand that housing is becoming more and more unaffordable. And for a long time, you had people moving out of cities. And now you have people moving into almost every city across America saying, I want the vibrancy, I want the urban living, I want the diversity. And it's creating some day-to-day issues for a lot of our low to moderate families as far as where am I going to find a place to live? And it is a kind of thing that's grown out of this idea that there's been so much revitalization and there's so many jobs and so much opportunity, and that a lot of mayors and a lot of public sector officials have done a good job working with their private sector partners to make cities places that people want to live. But that issue of housing, that issue of affordability is a market result of a lot of this demand and wonderful things going on in our cities. So it's something I think mayors and municipal officials throughout the state are working on.
So in my community, one of the biggest issues really has to do with childcare and workforce, and it's not specific to my borough, it's more a community at large kind of thing. And so we have to look at how do we work with our partners across municipal boundaries, working with employers, working with our chambers of commerce, that sort of thing, to solve these problems on a larger level.
So right now, housing is the biggest need that we're seeing in Altoona, and I know we're not that dissimilar from other cities in Pennsylvania and across America. That's a major issue right now on the minds of all local government officials. How do we solve that challenge? How do we get more houses built? How do we rehab the current housing stock that we have? So all things that we're wrestling with in the city of Altoona, and really looking forward to learning more here at the conference, networking with other folks, seeing what other communities are doing, and some ideas that maybe we can bring back to Altoona.
So one of the biggest issues facing Patton Township is the lack of attainable housing. We need to have more programs that help people that are in the middle of the income to have a house, be able to buy a house and afford a house in the State College area. So that's one of the things that we're going to be working on over the next couple of months.
We have a list of legislative priorities that are adopted by our membership the whole way through to our board of directors. We have legislative co-chairs representing both Republicans and Democrats because we're a bipartisan organization. And we push for those public safety issues, including the local use of radar. And frankly, we're the last state in the country to allow local police to use radar to control speeding. The state police can use it, but local police can't. So we'd like the change in the law, supported by law enforcement, so local police could utilize that technology and help slow people down when they're going through our boroughs, our townships, and our cities. We're also working on a whole host of other public safety issues, trying to help communities hire the best people possible for careers in law enforcement and a growing number of careers for fire and emergency services as the volunteers continue to dwindle, unfortunately, throughout our Commonwealth. A lot of our communities are hiring career drivers for the fire department or full-time career firefighters for their locations. So we want to continue to make sure we're promoting professionalism and helping local governments with the tools they need to provide public safety for their residents. PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, has become more and more important since the pandemic and what we all went through. The local responders have been asking for a post-traumatic stress benefit for firefighters, for police officers, EMS workers, and other public safety professionals. We worked with the career fire chiefs. We worked with the legislature to come up with some improved language on a bill that's been moving in both the House and the Senate. We think it's better for local government. We were worried about the cost that this could impose upon local taxpayers, especially at a time when some municipalities won't be able to afford additional costs. So we worked on a compromise, and we think the new language that's being reviewed right now by the Pennsylvania Senate and the Pennsylvania House will work for local government. Well, it actually goes back to 1965. There's been no significant change in Pennsylvania law regarding municipal taxation since 1965. So we did a report last year that focused on a menu of fiscal options to help local governments better balance their budgets. A lot of our local governments actually did really well the last year or two with the federal ARPA dollars from the American Rescue Plan and also from the Inflation Reduction Act and the federal infrastructure bill. Those three commitments from the federal government to the local government have been very helpful, but they're also going to run out. They're not forever. They're not permanent. So we need other options for local governments to afford public safety costs, providing for parks and recreation, doing all the public works activities that we have to do for our streets, our local roads. All of that has to be paid for, and we want to make sure that in this modern era, we have a more up-to-date taxing structure that will allow local governments to make decisions to help pay for those costs.
You need to talk with your House and Senate members on a regular basis. Get to know them, let them know what what the issues are in your community, and then talk to them about legislation. And it can be something you feel comfortable with. We can help you to be prepared to have a meeting with your legislators. But you're all representing the same people. You have the same constituents, and you're a constituent yourself. So building a relationship with them helps the league in our advocacy efforts, because if they hear from us that there's a problem with a piece of legislation, and then they hear about it from their own council members, commissioners, supervisors, then they'll pay more attention, honestly. And they'll also know that their local officials are paying attention to what they're doing in Harrisburg. So that's a level of accountability that they have to you that they don't have to us as a statewide association, where they could easily see us as complaining. Unfunded mandate, again, you're complaining about that again. It's important to provide a COLA to retirees. So if they hear from you that this is an expense that you don't want to have mandated, it helps us. So enough about that.
The League is embarked on a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiative where we do training for elected and appointed officials to talk about the changes in their communities, not just in terms of demographics, but in other ways as well. We focus on the human equity perspective. That means recognizing people, accepting people for who they are, acknowledging that they bring different skill sets to the table, but they identify differently than other people. And when we can set aside the differences and focus on what people can bring to the table in a positive and constructive fashion, everyone benefits, and the services are also rendered in an equitable fashion.
Why do we have DEIB training? Why is it so important? You all heard about George Floyd. You all heard about social unrest. We're all too familiar with political divisions in our country right now. We are polarized, unfortunately, and for the wrong reasons. So DEIB work is most important today than it's ever been. It also addresses effective employer outreach, also addresses outreach strategies for constituents, and at the end of the day, folks, we're empowering residents to be part of our communities, to volunteer on boards and commissions, to run for public office, to support the current elected and appointed officials. It also fosters stronger internal teams within your organization. Fosters creativity because it forces you to think outside the box in terms of inclusion. Helps foster understanding. And this is a fascinating fact that I came across. According to Forbes magazine last year, 80% of employees, no matter where, public, private sector, they expect DEIB initiatives to be part of their culture. 80%. That's headed in the right direction. No presentation of DEIB would be complete without first telling you what it's not. It's not critical race theory. It's not about making people feel badly about their biases. We all have these internal biases. All of us have them. I have them. I'm going to be sharing a link with you with the Harvard Implicit Bias Test. It's 30 minutes, it's free, absolutely fabulous. Blew my mind in terms of my own biases. And I'm going to encourage all of you to take that test. It is the best 30 minutes you're going to spend in a long time. Helps with better decision making. Again, expanded creativity, problem solving. We're going to talk about that a lot. It makes us better public servants when we can understand differences and embrace people and meet them where they are as elected officials. It also enhances employee recruitment, engagement, and retention. Let me say that again. Employee recruitment, engagement, and retention. You all want employees that want to be there serving your constituencies. You want those to feel comfortable in their environments so they can go home, because they are your best ambassadors, quite honestly. When you can go home and brag about what you do and the culture that you're in terms of inclusivity, that opens up a lot of ears and a lot of minds. And of course, it's all about connecting with our constituents as well. So, I'm going to throw this out there because sometimes DEIB is not as welcome in our communities as we like. And people sometimes just sigh, oh, here we go again, this DEIB stuff. So we ask ourselves, is there some sort of DEIB fatigue today in this country? Even though it's only been around for about 30 years, which is not a long time in this field, not a long time in this field. Can we sustain that momentum? The answer is yes, because we're getting better and better. And in fact, folks, I have revised this presentation 2 or 3 times because that's what we do in this field. We add and improve constantly, and we do research, and we talk to people, and we listen to podcasts, and we watch videos on YouTube to make this presentation better. Is the return of investment worth it with limited resources? And when I say limited resources, I don't mean just money. I'm talking about people as well. You could set aside $100,000 for an initiative, but if you don't have organized people that are willing to put their backs into this work, it's not going to work out. It's not going to succeed. Are we really making progress? Asking that all the time. There's a healthy dose of cynicism involved here. So it has to be result-oriented. And what difference do I actually make is another question. We feel like we don't make a difference sometimes, but we do. And it's incremental. Sometimes it's on an hourly basis, and that's how we have to look at this. Because at the end of the day, this is all about how we treat people, how we maximize what they bring to the table, how we celebrate their differences, how we see them as individuals. And I'll get to that as well. There was a great story. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. And the person who was arguing that before the Supreme Court was Thurgood Marshall with the NAACP. And Justice Frankfurter was frustrated with him. He says, you keep talking about equality, equality, equality. You keep talking about all these rights that you want, but what are you really saying? What does equality really mean? And Thurgood just stood up, he shrugged, and he says, it's getting the same thing at the same place at the same time. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I never forgot that. Brings me to an incident that I experienced when I was a member of the city council. I was at an event at one of the local banks. Wonderful reception, and at the end I was going to grab my coat from the cloakroom, and I was making small talk with a few people. One of them happened to be a bank executive. And as I was turning my back, a fella said, that Abe Ambrose, he's a good guy. And the bank president said, yeah, he's all right for a Puerto Rican. I heard that. Now, when you're 24 years old, you're not going to step to a bank president, all right? I wish I would have, because I have words for him now. These are the kinds of things that we experience on a daily basis, even today in 2024. Not based upon anything rational, based upon their own experiences, based upon their own biases, based upon the misinformation, all right? And we constantly have to struggle with this. Graduation rates. Communities of color still experience lower graduation rates. Employment and wealth and opportunities. I'll just give you one quick example. There was a study done in 2010 of graduates in schools of engineering. And what they wanted to see, not how many were employed, but how many were unemployed. 6% of white engineer graduates were unemployed, as opposed to 10% in the African American community and 15% in the Latino community.
Tell us, what is the value of having such a program?
Oh, the value is tremendous, simply because we are able to allow more people to come to the table to enjoy the benefits that are provided by these communities, and they, in turn, contribute to the social, cultural fabric of those communities as well. So it's an exciting initiative because you're taking a look at everyone, accepting everyone for what they bring to the table, and then harnessing that energy, harnessing those strengths, so then we can all move forward together.
We're talking about shared prosperity and ensuring that communities and cities can both, grow equitably alongside one another, where you are creating neighborhoods that are flourishing and cities that are flourishing because the neighborhoods are flourishing. So really tapping into an equitable development conversation around how to do that, how to do public-private partnerships, sample projects. I talked a lot about the Hill District, which is located right in the heart of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but also has lots of comparables to other communities throughout the state. So hopefully sharing some best practices that people can take with them.
So the Hill District was a bustling, densely populated area, mostly made up of Eastern European immigrants and African Americans who had migrated from the South, with over 40,000 residents. It was depopulated due to industry modernization, job loss, redlining, which is essentially where banks were refusing to loan to mostly people of color, especially black people, in either certain neighborhoods or to that specific borrower. And then, of course, white flight, which caused many, kind of vacancies within the urban core in neighborhoods like the Hill District. If you're familiar with the Hill District, it's located between downtown Pittsburgh and the University District of Oakland. Okay, it is an 1,100-acre neighborhood right in the heart of Pittsburgh. Well, in the late 1950s, the city, as were many cities throughout the country, were going through what they call urban renewal, right? They were going to remove blight and inspire redevelopment. And so for the Hill District, for Pittsburgh, there were several neighborhoods that were selected for urban renewal. East Liberty was one. The North Side was another, and the Hill District is probably one of the more known stories, but it was one of the first throughout the country. This is the original vision that was pitched by our municipality, and at the time, the new Urban Redevelopment Authority. So if you know, I presume many of you have redevelopment authorities, but redevelopment authorities were established to essentially revamp cities and municipalities, and Pittsburgh's is called the Urban Redevelopment Authority. And so they were pretty new at the time. This was one of their first projects. Well, this project ended up being, as you can see, a massive endeavor that the city was planning to undertake. You can see downtown right at the, I guess that'll be the top of the screen for you. And you can see the big circle. And they were planning it around what was called the Civic Light Opera House, okay? This was not the Civic Arena at the time, and it certainly wasn't an arena that you would have heard of right now, but it was going to be an opera house that would open up. The roof was to open up, and it was supposed to be a marvel. In fact, it was an architectural marvel, but it only ended up opening a few times, I believe 2. But with that was the vision, was to build a new cultural center for our city. So what happened to all of those homes and buildings underneath that circle? Well, they were all demolished, of course. 100 acres of land was cleared, 430 businesses displaced, 1,200 buildings demolished, and about 8,000 residents displaced, 2/3 of whom were African American. The rest were from, different Eastern European communities, because that's where folks had immigrated from. This is the Greater Hill District Master Plan. This master plan was created with community, and over a span of a couple of years, we brought in a firm based out of Boston, actually. It cost $350,000 back in 2011. So that gives you a sense. Now again, our neighborhood is 1,100 acres, so it's the size of a small town. After we finished our master plan, which included lots of community meetings and lots of engagement and a few arguments, more than a few, we then went on and we said, it's time to implement. We were so excited. We said, it's time to implement our plan. And the local government, the Urban Redevelopment Authority, issued an RFP, almost months after the plan.
My advice would be to be bold, to find creative ways to bring additional revenue into municipalities that are oftentimes scary conversations for elected officials to have. Engage your residents. You know, they voted for, you know, elected representatives, and they also generally want to see cities thrive. And sometimes change is scary, but when you engage them deeply and meaningfully, generally it can work out quite well. So engage communities from the very beginning, bring them along through the visioning process, and then be creative in how those projects get funded and delivered.
My message today was about the huge responsibility that PennDOT has, meeting the transportation needs of 13 million Pennsylvanians, and working with our partners across the state, including folks here today from our boroughs and townships and cities, to coordinate our efforts on behalf of our shared constituents. There are some challenges on the horizon for us when it comes to transportation funding in particular. You probably all are aware that this year the liquid fuel allocation to your communities ticked down a bit. And that is probably going to be the norm for the foreseeable future. Motor fuel revenue, tax revenue is declining. It's declining as a result of more efficient internal combustion engines. It's declining because of the growing population of both plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. And the amount of revenue that PennDOT collects as a result of those declining motor fuel purchases is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And that will affect directly the allocation that you all receive in your liquid fuel allocation. That is a challenge for us. And the federal transportation bill, wildly helpful for all of us when it comes to delivering transportation projects, does include electric charging station build-out across all 50 states. In fact, the very first electric charging station in Pennsylvania was opened here in northeastern Pennsylvania at the I-81 truck stop in Pittston. The first charging station, there's been others, one in Venango County, one in Delaware County. These charging stations will populate the interstate network first, and then interstate lookalikes after that, and then community charging as well. But what will happen as a result of that, the build-out of the charging stations, more and more electric and hybrid electric vehicles will be purchased. The declining tax revenue from motor fuel taxes will accelerate, and we will have a challenge across the nation with respect to how to backfill those lost dollars. It will be a huge challenge. Well, of course, transportation comes with a very big price tag. We're very fortunate to have access to federal funds from the federal transportation bill that was enacted a few years ago. Those funds, combined with the funds that PennDOT receives from the 13 million Pennsylvanians, will help improve the multi-modes of transportation we have across our state.
The Pennsylvania State Association of Township Commissioners drives values to the 93 first-class townships here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania by empowering first-class leadership, educational resources, and networking opportunities. There's a variety of issues that are facing members in first-class townships throughout the Commonwealth, including the delivery of emergency services, certainly changing demographics within our communities, but also leadership, and how do we develop new leaders for a new generation in the future. So all these combined really present some opportunities, but also some challenges that are facing local governments throughout the Commonwealth. By building safe and resilient communities, we're able to set a strong foundation for tomorrow. And it's not just the challenges of environmental issues, which are certainly there, but it's also a crisis of leadership, of financial management, of really training leaders in order to empower them with decision-making abilities to understand the environment that's around us, to really inherently build into our systems, our processes, our thought, or how do we transform our operations, our culture, our ecosystem that we work in. How do we grab partners within our communities and collaborate, not just within our townships, but the cities and the boroughs and the counties and the authorities that are really part of that ecosystem of local governments in Pennsylvania.
We are the Pennsylvania Career Fire Chiefs Association. We're a organization that represents the interests of fire chiefs across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, both as career fire chiefs, We're 120 members strong, and we cover the entire Commonwealth. In total, our fire chiefs serve a combined population of about 2.2 million Pennsylvanians. Some of our biggest challenges right now are budgetary, right? It's having enough staff, right? It's recruitment and retention, not just of volunteers, but of career firefighters as well, right? When we see that pool of volunteer firefighters not there, right, that equates to us not having enough people being able to or willing to take our firefighter tests, right? So we're seeing recruitment and retention issues in the career setting as well, not just in the volunteer.
The Business Leaders Network is an indispensable program that we have at the League, which allows vendors that interface with communities and also with local governments to help them do their jobs better. These services and programs that they provide ultimately benefit the constituents and those that elect individuals to these offices. So the Business Leaders Network has been tremendous for the League, and it allows them an opportunity to get in front of a captive audience as well, and it's been working out really well.
We've been a member of the Business Leaders now for approximately 10 years. Been associated with the League now for, I believe this is my 28th conference I've come to. We find it a great benefit, especially being with the Business Leader program, because it gives us good access to the elected officials, the decision makers, and are able, in their worlds, they're extremely busy, a million things going on. So many of us have niche services that we provide, and it's difficult if you only got 2 or 3 minutes to introduce that concept or idea. Here we're able to sit down, explain to them the value we're able to bring to their community. In my case, being independent fiduciary oversight helps their employees, helps them, helps their constituents. So it's a win-win for everybody.
The Business Leaders Network is a great opportunity as a business that works with communities across Pennsylvania to really get to know them on a more personal level, meet with them, hear their needs, and really see how our business could help them reach some of their priorities.
So I'm Matt Shortle from Constellation Energy. We've been a member of the Business Leaders Network for in excess of a decade, actually. We actually run the Municipal Utility Alliance for the League, and the Business Leaders Network really gives us a unique opportunity to interface with the board, with the membership, and really help to grow our program.
Member of the Business Leaders Network from PML, Radisson, and we do auditing and accounting consultant for governments.
Has it been valuable for you?
Yes, very much so. We can meet with a lot of different municipalities and gain relationships with them.
Our firm is a member of the Business Leaders Network, and that has enabled us to make connections with many of the municipalities and the organizations that are involved with PML, and has been a great relationship for us.
Today's topic that we're talking about is implementing social work in the police department. We've learned over the years, and this has been something that's been taking place for a long time, but just in different ways. We needed to be more responsive to our communities and inviting our communities into some deeper conversations about how we can better care for the folks of our community. And one of the ways that we found that is by implementing social work in the police department.
Our session today was on revitalization. We talked about what we're doing in Scranton on a variety of fronts to revitalize our community, to build economic growth, to help small businesses, to help our community organizations. There's so much that we've been able to do in these last few years thanks to the American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and some great teamwork here on the ground, and we are excited to share that with our colleagues here at PML.
Our workshop today deals with the topic of regionalization. There are very many different models, right? And you have to look at the region and the organizations that are there, and most importantly, the people, to make sure that you choose the right method and get them to come together effectively.
Our workshop today deals with housing affordability. It's about paying attention to all of the ways that zoning requirements and redevelopment and ordinances that we create have often limited the redevelopment and the creation of new housing units. We have a housing shortage nationwide, and whether you're a small borough like mine or a big city like Pittston or Bethlehem. There are ranges of housing issues across all municipalities in Pennsylvania. So this session looks at some case studies from some specific examples of what we've all been doing in our communities and tips and tricks that other people can take and use in their own communities.
Our workshop today is about artificial intelligence and how it could bring a higher level of service to citizens through the municipalities. You've heard about public safety, public health, resource management, and AI can help us understand what the citizens want, give them a voice where they can go to the websites and talk to chatbots and give their opinions on different policies and procedures, and helps the municipalities make decisions based on what the public sentiment is.
Local government is where the rubber hits the road. We're the ones that deliver clean water to your house and take the dirty water away and fix the streets in front of your house and operate the local transportation system. So it's vitally important to just your daily needs. Plus, we do a lot of work with giving people opportunities to be socially engaged with different events and things that don't cost any money. They're open to the community, and we get a lot of participation in those. So, and I think that helps with the civility thing, because you get people out intermingling with each other and hopefully talking.
The feds can kick it to the state can kick it down to the local level. We have to get things done. When our constituents get upset at the state or federal, they're going to come to us, and they get upset at the local level, they're going to come to us. But we're actually where you can make a lot of change happen relatively quickly at the local level, whether that's taxes, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's public safety, whether that's parks and recreation. We can have ideas, we can have initiatives, and we can implement them again, relatively more quickly than maybe at the state or federal level. So I think local government sometimes maybe gets overlooked a little bit because we focus on governor, we focus on president, but I tell people all the time, you cannot forget about your local elections. Those people are where you can really make change happen.
The importance of local government is understanding that all of the action takes place at the local level, right? It's our police department, it's our public works department. They are out in the public eye. They're out there responding to whatever emergency crisis is happening. It's understanding that the planning department is responding to whatever developer who wants to put in a new business or start to have an excavator, start to dig up dirt. It's understanding that all of the action is taking place at the local level, and so our elected officials, me as the manager and our staff, we have a responsibility, a duty, an obligation to respond to what our citizens need and what their concerns are. And without having local government in place, then you would have to be figuring out how you're going to contact your state legislators and your representatives, and we know that they're also very busy. So I think the importance of local government is simply recognizing that we are right there living in the community, and we are right there to serve, and we live and work alongside everyone that we serve.
Looking at the surveys, you'll find local government is the most trusted form of government there is. The higher up on the ladder you go, the least, let's say, respect that they get for the work that they do. And the value of local government is the people that you work for are your neighbors, and you see them at the gas station, the grocery store, all kinds of places. So you're accessible. You aren't hard to get to.
Local government is where it happens. People trust their local leaders more than they do their state and federal leaders usually. That's because they know them, right? So local leaders have to deliver. We have to show our constituents that we're there for them. If it starts at the local level, if that is solid, we're going to have better continuity, better trust in institutions all across the board. That's good for our country. It's good for economic security. It's good for democracy.
How can people get more information?
They can visit our website at pml.org or give us a call. We'll make sure they get connected if they don't know their local officials or if they're not exactly sure how to proceed. But there's lots of opportunities for citizens to show up at meetings, to learn what's happening, and to literally volunteer to get involved in the decisions of their local government.